My name is Marcelo and this is the Gamma Ecosystem. My mission here is to talk about hidden gems. And today I'm gonna talk about the Avalanche project. And to talk about it, I'm gonna show a video I recorded with the amazing Gabriel Cardona. He's a blockchain evangelist and he works for Ava Labs, the company responsible to develop the Avalanche platform. Here we go! Hi everyone! Today I have a special guest with me. It's Gabriel Cardona. It's a blockchain evangelist and he works for Ava Labs, the company behind the project, the blockchain of Avalanche. Gabriel Cardona, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. So if you could give a quick introduction about yourself, how you started in crypto and what's your role in Ava Labs today?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. As he mentioned, my name is Gabriel Cardona. I am developer evangelist at Ava Labs. And so a brief history on myself. I live in San Francisco Bay Area with my son. I have a son who will be a teenager this year. And I've been here for about 11 years. And most of that time I have been working in different startups. And I've worked in and out of the crypto industry several times. So I actually found out about Bitcoin and got my very first Bitcoin way back in 2011 from the very first ever Bitcoin faucet, which was run by Gavin Andreessen. And then around, I want to say 2014 or so, I had a similar idea to what I'm working on now, which was developer tooling and cloud services for Bitcoin apps. This is before Ethereum. The name of the startup was called Gitcoin, Gitcoin, which of course there's a very popular Gitcoin service today on Ethereum. This is something totally different. But it was just a little early in the Bitcoin ecosystem and my skills were not as developed as they are today as an engineer. And I was around for the original Ethereum crowd sale. And then around 2017, the end of 2016, 2017, I was actually doing a personal startup building a 3D printer, which was connected to the Internet of Things using MQTT, and then also could basically use web tech to read from a block explorer so that you could use an Ethereum smart contract to kick off a 3D print. Around that time, I discovered, I really did a deep dive on Truffle, which is an amazing developer tooling kit for Ethereum. And it caused me to want to recreate that developer workflow for the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. I was a big advocate of Bitcoin Cash in the very beginning. And so I sorry about that. I had a startup called Bitbox, which was ultimately acquired by Bitcoin.com in 2018. And I ended up there as the director of developer services. And then I was there through 2019. And then I joined Ava Labs maybe around 2 months or so before the mainnet launch. And so now I basically primarily focus on developer tooling. So I maintain Avalanche JS. I also help maintain Avalanche, which is like our local development environment. And then I do a ton of partner integration stuff. So we have, I think, 234 projects which have went live on our mainnet in 10 months. And so there's just a lot of interfacing with engineers and helping them understand our tech stack and helping, dial everything in for them.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I met you because I was a big advocate for Bitcoin Cash as well. I was the host for a Bitcoin Cash here in Brazil. And so I saw many of her podcasts. And actually, I met Avalanche because of a Twitter that you sent in May 2020. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. He told me this earlier when we had a talk and he showed me the original tweet. I just want to say, genuinely, that means a lot to me to think that, the advocacy that I'm putting out there is having an impact. And so it's no different than myself, right? People influenced me and I fell down the rabbit hole. So it's really nice to think that I'm returning that to some other people. So thank you. That means a lot.
Yes, it is for sure. And now that we are starting to talk about Avalanche, as a full disclaimer here, after your Twitter, I started to study the project. I was an investor since the initial public sale. So as a full disclaimer, I'm invested in this. And so I have skin in the game with Avalanche. Nice. And it's very nice to have Gabriel here because Gabriel's is the guy who makes these codes. He's a developer for the Avalanche ecosystem. So I think we can begin talking because for a lot of people, I believe all around the world and in Brazil as well, there are so many blockchains that people say, oh, it's Bitcoin, Ethereum. Oh, no, it's Cardano, Binance, Polygon, Solana. Oh my gosh. And when you say to people, hey, what do you know about Avalanche? And I don't know. But for me, it's just that there are so many projects that people cannot follow and understand the full details, why it has potential or not. So I would like to, with your experience with Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum, explain why Avalanche? What does Avalanche bring to the table?
Sure. And feel free to cut me off at any time if you want to cut in with a question or a comment. I don't mind. So we really do believe that Avalanche is a blockchain 3.0 technology. And so similar to, blockchain 1.0 being Bitcoin, we think of blockchain 2.0 as being Ethereum, and then we think of Avalanche being a blockchain 3 ecosystem. And so I'll kind of walk into that real quick. So, Bitcoin was a decentralized payment network, but and it obviously introduced a ton of innovation around, consensus and distributed peer-to-peer payments, but it's kind of slow. It doesn't have fast finality. It doesn't have great tokens, and it doesn't have great smart contracts. And so Ethereum really solved some of those problems by introducing its own virtual machine with a higher level scripting language called Solidity. There's others, Viper and a few others, that can compile down. And it just set off an entire wave of innovation around tokenomics and DeFi and all these things. And we believe that Avalanche represents a third big leap forward in the blockchain space. And we have 4 paradigms, which we really think are new. The first is, unlike previous networks like Bitcoin or Ethereum, where you have one virtual machine and one set of miners, in Avalanche, we are a network of networks. So there will ultimately be many, many different virtual machines and many sets of what we call validators. And then this will lead to compound network effects, which are like amplified network effects. Next, we have virtual machines. So today, as an Ethereum developer, you define your decentralized app as a smart contract. I'm sorry, I'm getting DMs from all kinds of messages. Let me close this. Today, you define your decentralized app as a smart contract, and that's clearly very powerful. Ethereum is amazing. I won't take any shots at them. But Solidity is not incredibly intuitive. I myself work with TypeScript and Golang all day long, and there's so many other languages, C++ and Rust and Python. And a lot of times when developers are on-ramping into our ecosystem, even though we have really powerful Turing-complete scripting languages, they feel a little bit boxed in and a little bit awkward and just not super modern in what you're used to. And so
just a minute, could you explain what is Turing-complete? So for the people who are not too familiar.
Sure. So Turing complete actually goes back to a computer scientist from the 40s and 50s in Great Britain. His name was Alan Turing, and really he is the grandfather of what we think of as modern computing. There's a few other ones who deserve mention, like John von Neumann. There's a lot of great giants that we stand upon the shoulders of. But effectively, there's this idea of what's called a Turing complete, or basically the halting problem. Somebody should go Google it. I'm going to vastly oversimplify this. But at a super high level, a Turing complete language will give you things like recursion and state. Again, that's a super oversimplification. I ask forgiveness from any hardcore computer scientists out there because I know I'm butchering that. But effectively, you can think about it something like anything that can be computed without running into this halting problem falls within this state of what's called Turing complete, right? So it's basically just like this huge area of potential problem-solving space that you can pull your solutions out of. And there are other languages like Script, which is on Bitcoin, which is still incredibly powerful. And you can do a lot with Bitcoin smart contracts and Bitcoin Cash smart contracts, but they lack a few primitives such as recursion and state. Some people say that was intentional, that Satoshi wanted to limit the functionality of what was available in Script to potentially reduce any type of logic bombs or something like that that could exist in the code. Ethereum got around that by charging what's called gas. So basically you pay for every step in this execution. So if you put a loop in your code that says while true loop, right, and you just want to freeze everybody's computer and loop forever, you'll pay for that, and eventually you'll run out of money. So again, that's a vast oversimplification, and I'm sure you can get a better answer from YouTube or Wikipedia. But yeah, basically a Turing complete language is like a language which can compute anything which doesn't ultimately run into the halting problem.
This was one big advancement comparing Ethereum to Bitcoin to Ethereum, right? Because Ethereum is Turing complete, but Bitcoin is not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first time I read about Ethereum back in 2015, immediately it was like, oh, this is going to be huge. And they were very ambitious in the beginning. They were going to have like 3 or 4 clients in 4 or 5 different languages. And I think it ultimately ended up with only 1 or 2 clients, 1 or 2 languages, but that's okay. In my mind, it's still very early, right? Like I think a lot of people kind of think that we're in the end game. I don't see it that way at all. I see it more like we are akin to the people who created the ARPANET at the end of the 60s, or the people who created the TCP/IP stack in the early 70s. We're very early, and our work will have impact in 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the same way that these guys and gals at the late 60s and 70s, their work is having more impact today than ever, right? Every single day, the web is more powerful and more impactful. And so I believe our work is similar. So, to bring it back to what you're talking about, yeah, a big leap forward from Ethereum was that they offered this Turing complete language. And it's the reason that we see so much innovation on Ethereum that we do not see in ecosystems like Bitcoin, simply because the scripting language is just not as powerful and it doesn't enable as many potential solutions.
Right. You know, when I see that for me, when I started to study blockchain 4 years ago, I see that there were this really advancements from Bitcoin, that you have the first peer-to-peer electronic cash from an incredible idea from Satoshi. Then came Vitalik and the Ethereum team with this Turing complete smart contracts platform. And then 1 year ago, I saw an interview with Emin Gunsirer, that is the CEO of Ava Labs, that called a lot of my attention, because it was the first time that I really understood what was scaling. Because a lot of people say, oh, let's scale Lightning Network, let's try layer 2, let's try Ethereum 2.0. And I really liked what Emin Gunsirer said, that you need TPS, you need high transaction of speed, and also you need quick finality. So I think if you could explain, I think what's the biggest innovation from Avalanche is the consensus protocol. If you could give an explanation, when it was created, what is this Avalanche consensus protocol that has the same name of the blockchain, and also why this is important to scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So consensus, which you hear a lot if you work in the blockchain space, sort of like, what is consensus? Consensus is the process by which a series of individual, in our case, validators, but it can be people, it can be anything. Consensus is just like, how do you get a bunch of people to agree on something, like at a super high level? And it's a very, very rich field of computer science. It goes back at least 40 years to the 70s and 80s. And there had really been 3 major paradigms. And so the first one is what's called classical consensus. And again, it goes back to the 70s and 80s. And classical consensus has very fast throughput and fast finality. It's very lightweight, but it's not decentralized. It's not robust, and it does not perform well in adversarial conditions. And when Satoshi released Bitcoin in 2008, 2009, it doesn't actually say consensus anywhere in the white paper, but very soon academics and computer scientists and hackers, et cetera, realized that really what's happening is there is a new type of consensus here, and it has since been called Nakamoto consensus. And so Nakamoto consensus is very decentralized and robust, but it loses the good properties of classical consensus. It's slow. It only does a handful of transactions a second. It takes an hour for your transaction to settle, and doesn't perform great in adversarial conditions, the 51% attack. In around 2017, 2018, a pseudonymous group known as Team Rocket released a white paper on the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, that introduced an entire new class of consensus called Avalanche consensus. And basically it uses what is known as metastability, and random repeated subsampling to achieve the best of both worlds, right? So it's incredibly decentralized and robust. Today on our mainnet, we have 1,005 or so full block and vertices producing validators. And in theory, theoretically, I've heard that it can go to millions. Of course, that's a theoretical limit. Nobody's tested that in, practical real world scenario. But even 1,000 full block producing validators is already a really, really big milestone. And then also it has very fast finality. So I have seen transactions settle in like 20 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds. I believe on our website, we say 3 seconds, which is just being conservative, but really it's about the speed of a blink of a human eye. And so one of the things, when you go from Bitcoin to Ethereum, even though Bitcoin has 10-minute blocks, really you have to wait about an hour. You have to wait 6 transactions. That's why Coinbase makes you wait an hour before you get access to your money. Because they want to be real, real sure nobody's going to come back and take their money from them. Ethereum has blocks that are maybe like 15 or 20 seconds, but because it's Nakamoto consensus, you still have to wait a few blocks. So it's a huge leap forward from Bitcoin, no question about it. But when you think about some certain classes of applications like decentralized exchanges, for example, centralized exchanges and Wall Street firms, they will literally put their hardware in different places around the world to get fractions of a second shaved off from their requests, and this gives them competitive edge against their their competitors, obviously, and this is a huge win. So even when you're dealing with something like Ethereum that has 15 or 20-second blocks, it's just not enough to compete against some of these traditional finance players. With Avalanche, we don't even have the concept of a reorg attack. So there's no such thing. After 1 second, you have complete, immutable, irreversible finality. It's done. It's very akin to when you walk into a merchant, you pay with cash and you're out, right? And so it really does just, the analogy I've been giving, and it's a bit crude, but it does sort of fit, is when the web first emerged in the mid-90s, a lot of people realized this is going to be transformative, right? This is going to change the game. And so there was this huge rush of money, and we had the dot-com boom in 99, 2000. But a lot of people used the technology and realized, this just isn't quite mature. This is definitely not as good as the native Windows or Mac apps, right? And so in around 2000, 2001, the bubble popped and a lot of money rushed out. But the people who stayed true to the vision continued executing. And then in around 2004, 2005, there was this Web 2.0 moment where Ajax, asynchronous JavaScript, and XML, and a few other technologies matured enough to where the web matured. It had a coming of age moment, and it became a real application platform. And then you got HTML5 and modern CSS and JavaScript. And today the web is an actual application platform. To me, Avalanche Consensus represents a coming of age moment for the blockchain. So going all the way back to Bitcoin, people knew this is incredibly transformative. This has the potential to democratize finance in the same way that the web democratized information and made the totality of all human knowledge available ubiquitously to everyone. The blockchain has the potential to do that with finance, and that's going to be very transformative, but the technology was just not mature. And so, asking people to wait, obviously, an hour to make a point of sale purchase is not going to fly. And even asking them to wait a few minutes is not going to fly, because that's just not the way people use money, right? But the Avalanche Consensus with this sub-second, immutable, irreversible finality, it's this coming of age moment for the blockchain where all of these use cases we've talked about for years all of a sudden become practical, because we can literally have this cash-like experience of this instant finality. So I would agree. I think the biggest leap forward that's happening on Avalanche is Avalanche Consensus. And what's really exciting is if you launch your blockchain or smart contract or DApp or whatever on Avalanche, you get that stuff out of the box, but you can also use Avalanche Consensus on other networks. So for example, I believe Flare is a fork or a derivative of the Ripple protocol, which is using Avalanche Consensus. And I know recently the eCash project launched, which is Amare Sachet was one of the guys who created Bitcoin Cash. And now they have a version of Bitcoin. It's like a Bitcoin fork that uses Avalanche Consensus for pre and post consensus and Nakamoto consensus in the middle. And it basically cuts down the user experience to seconds there as well. So I think it speaks to the power of Avalanche Consensus, that not only is it transformative in our ecosystem, but other blockchains and other layer one networks are seeing the value enough to where they're porting it to their networks as well.
Yeah, I think it's really amazing to understand this. It's the settlement time. Like you said, it's Bitcoin. It can go like the blocks. It's every 10 minutes. So it's near 60 minutes sometimes. If you make if you transfer to exchange like Coinbase. In the DeFi world, I think it's very important as well, because if you go to Uniswap and you make a swap, you need to wait. If you are lucky, you need to wait like 15 seconds, because it's basically the time between every block from Ethereum. And sometimes if there is a lot of people using, I stayed like many minutes just waiting for one transaction on Uniswap. So I think we could talk now about the DeFi on Avalanche in this amazing opportunity, I guess, and also talk about this is maybe a technical conversation. This is not financial advice what we're doing here, but if you look at the market cap from AVAX, that is the native token from Avalanche, it's very small compared to other projects. It's $2 billion. It's the number 50. If you look into all the big projects, it's like Dogecoin. It's more than 10 times bigger. So we are very, very, very early. So that's why I say to people, it's not financial advice, but look more for Avalanche, because it's a great tech. There is many different things. So talking about the DeFi on Avalanche, what could you say about the projects that are running already on the DeFi ecosystem from Avalanche?
Yeah, so to touch on your second point first, I also am not giving financial advice. That's not my style. But what I will say is that the vision of Avalanche is to build the internet of finance. And so we are offering this full suite of best-in-class APIs, which allow you to build completely permissionless networks. So if you want to launch the next Bitcoin, if you want to launch the next Ethereum, you should do it on Avalanche, because you get all of the benefits of everything I've talked about: virtual machines, subnets, sub-second finality, all this fast throughput, thousands of transactions per second, all of this stuff. You get it out of the box. But on the other end of the spectrum, because the problem we're trying to address is the internet of finance, we know that traditional finance, it's hard to quantify what is actual finance worth in the world. It's thousands of trillions of dollars, right? You can't really put a number on it, but it's a lot. It's a mind-boggling amount of money. How much wealth is in the world, right? Like a lot. If you take in gold and cash and stocks and cryptos, like we're talking in real estate, like it's a lot of money, wealth in the world. And much of it is not permissionless. Much of it is behind regulatory compliance or something like that. And so we want to offer a full spectrum of APIs, from permissionless to permissioned and everything in between. So just in the context of how big is Avalanche, well, the market we're trying to address is thousands of trillions of dollars. And some of the partners that we're integrating manage $500 billion, $1 trillion, just single individual partners that are Wall Street firms. These firms deal with some serious amount of wealth, right? So again, the potential market that Avalanche is competing for is absolutely huge. Now, with regards to DeFi, so again, because we have this architecture where you can create your own virtual machines, we were able to take an instance of the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM, which has been one of the huge innovations around Ethereum. Is not even necessarily the network, which is incredibly valuable, and not even the team, Vitalik and his crew, but it's just the virtual machine. The fact that there's this virtual machine that you can tease out of the network and launch your own instance of, the Binance Smart Chain, Polygon or Matic, or, there's all these different instances of the EVM. We launched one on the Avalanche network that we call the C chain. It stands for our contract chain. And it has had absolutely explosive growth. I just mentioned previously that we have, I believe, 234 projects live on the mainnet today in 10 months. I would say 90% of those are on the C chain.
200.
Yeah, there you go. Because we have 100% backwards compatibility with Ethereum developer tooling. So if you have a dApp today that's live on Ethereum and the high fees and stuff annoy you, you can take your code and your workflow and drop it into the Avalanche ecosystem with very, very minor integration. I'm talking incredibly minor. That's why we've had such an explosive growth, because it's been very, very easy for people to port over their apps. We have something called Pangolin, which is like a Uniswap clone that launched on Avalanche. I don't know how long it's been live now, but I think 8 weeks after it went live, I want to get these numbers right. There's just so many numbers, but basically 2 or 3 months after it had went live, it had already done $3 billion in volume, which, is relatively not a lot, relatively a lot, right?
Yeah.
But so to me, the opportunity space is, again, I think DeFi is incredibly transformative. Like, imagine this scenario. Imagine you're a 13-year-old young lady in India or Pakistan, right? Traditionally, you would have been very boxed out of any type of financial services, any type of financial innovation. Today, those same people, if they have any type of crypto, they can, stake or yield farm or do peer-to-peer payments, send any amount of money to anybody in the world, basically for free with no middlemen, basically instantly. All of the promises of the blockchain are really now coming into fruition, and DeFi is a big part of that. And so again, I just draw the analogy in the same way the web democratized information, the blockchain and DeFi are going to democratize money. And that is an absolute game changer for everybody around the world. So I would say we've had an absolute explosion of automated market makers. We've got some stable coins. We've got prediction markets. We've got a bunch of different like yield compound farmers. There's so much going on that it's even possible for me to wrap my mind around it now. But I believe that Avalanche's DeFi ecosystem has the potential to be. I think of Avalanche. Again, I do not mean this as financial advice, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm talking about the importance of the project. I believe that Avalanche ranks up there in the top 5 projects out there. I really do. Yeah, today we're 50 in coin market cap. But believe it or not, money's not what drives me, right? I was into Bitcoin when Bitcoin was worth nothing. I was into Ethereum when Ethereum was worth nothing. So to work on a project which is 50th in the ecosystem, I don't really care so much because I'm seeing the second, third, fourth order effects of our work. And I know that with regards to our team, I've been in the blockchain industry now for 10 years. I've never personally worked on a team ever that is as good as, the team from Ava Labs, starting with Gun at the very top, Kevin, Ted, John, all of our C-level executives all the way down. Because Gun is a professor at Cornell, we just have a really strong deal flow with all kinds of Cornell engineers. This number might be wrong, but I believe we're around 60 people today. And I think we have 9 PhDs. Again, those numbers could be wrong. Everything's moving very. I think so. I could be wrong on that. I'm sorry if I misquoted that. I heard that somewhere. But the point simply being, we are pulling in amazing talent from Cornell and a bunch of other schools all the time. So just to kind of bring it back on track, I believe that DeFi is as transformative of the web as the web. And I believe that, in my opinion, Avalanche is the premier platform for DeFi simply because, sure, you can go launch on Binance Smart Chain. Sure, you can go launch on Solana. They all have their own pros and cons. And I'm not even a maxi, and I'm not a hater on those guys and gals. I wish them all the very best. What I want is for blockchain technology to reach its full potential and to uplift the human condition in my lifetime. I believe that's a possibility. I hope it's with the technology I work on. If it's not, that's okay, because the goal is still the same for the blockchain technology to uplift people's lives. However, Binance Smart Chain, Solana, all of these guys, they don't have Avalanche consensus, right? Avalanche consensus is the big deal that, in my opinion, makes the Avalanche ecosystem, I should say, such a huge potential in the DeFi play.
Yeah, and it's amazing for me that the mainnet was launched last September. It's less than a year. Then there are so many projects live.
It's crazy.
I personally, my appeal to everyone that likes decentralized exchanges, try Pangolin. It's so quick that the finality it settles in. It's faster than your browser refreshes. It's crazy. It's very fast.
And really, the limit there is the EVM. So Avalanche Consensus does like 4,500 transactions a second and maybe sub-second finality, but the EVM cannot handle that much. The EVM handles, I think, like 400 or 500 transactions a second. And technically, we cannot get transactions to settle any faster on the EVM than the EVM can handle. So even though we can send thousands of transactions a second to it, it cannot actually handle that. I know there's been some R&D work internally to make optimizations on the EVM, but they're just R&D right now and they're not yet public.
Yeah. So in talking about the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM, I heard a few months ago, Kevin Seknik, the COO from Ava Labs, saying that for him, he believes in a multi-chain, a lot of blockchains in the future, but he believes the standard is the EVM. Do you think the same thing, or do you think it differently?
Yeah, I think it's clear that the EVM is the winner today when it comes to the layer 1 virtual machine of DeFi. But I say that with like 1,000 caveats because, again, I don't believe this is the end game. I say this like once a day. So anybody who's heard me talk has heard what I'm about to say, but I say it every single day because it's a really, really, really big thing to internalize. And if you can internalize, if you can grok it, right? If anybody's ever read Stranger in a Strange Land, if you can grok this, if you can really, really internalize this, this could be the opportunity that defines your lifetime and your career. This is how I operate every single day. The pace of change is accelerating so drastically that in the next 10 years, we will experience more technological innovation than we did in the previous 100 years. And that's outrageously disruptive. It could end up being really good or really bad. And the way it ends up is based upon the work that we do right now, because we're experiencing an inflection point, right? So an inflection point is like when something goes from 1 to 1,000 very quickly. And if you think about it like a straight line or something, if you go from here to there 1,000 miles instantly, or there 1,000 miles, you end up in two very different places, right? So the potential place that we end up as a society in 10 years from now really depends a lot on the work that we do today. And so whenever I say that the EVM is the winner of the layer 1 DeFi, I do think there will be competition in the future. But yeah, for now, I think it seems clear that you can spin up an instance of the EVM. And if you have some type of special sauce, if you're Binance Smart Chain and you're a huge exchange and you can fund the chain being super fast or whatever, if you're Solana and you have their special sauce, you know, every single instance of the EVM that is booming, that has its own special sauce, ours happen to be Avalanche Consensus. It just, the fact that you can take a Uniswap and clone it and just drop it on Pangolin and it works nearly out of the box. And then there's so much value, right? There's so much liquidity that can be brought over from Ethereum. We're talking, I think the first weekend we spun up our bridge between Avalanche and Ethereum, I believe over $100 million worth of assets transferred over from Ethereum, right? So there's just an insane amount of equity and wealth in the EVM ecosystem. And then there's so much developer tooling, right? So yeah, I do believe that today the EVM is probably the winner with regards to the layer 1 of DeFi.
Yeah, awesome. So I also would like to cover a last topic that I think can become huge. I think this could be the real game change for Avalanche, for the crypto world in general. There are subnets. Everybody's talking about when subnets and when permissionless subnets. So if you could give an explanation of what are subnets, what are permissionless subnets, what can we do with them?
Yeah, so I agree. Subnets are one of the four paradigms that we introduced. And basically, subnets allow anybody anywhere to spin up their own tailor-made network, and they can have custom virtual machines and complex validator rule sets. So let's make sense of what that means. Today, there are a bunch of layer 1 networks. You know, name your favorite blockchain. Chances are it's not live on a multi-blockchain platform such as Avalanche, but there's also Polkadot and there's Cosmos. There's many, many different people who are sort of solving the same problem as us. I happen to believe that Avalanche has the best set of solutions, but again, I'm not a maxi by any means. And if you're launching on Polkadot or Cosmos, I genuinely wish you the best. But today, you know, Bitcoin is its own thing. Ethereum is its own thing. Doge is its own thing. And yes, there are bridges that exist between these ecosystems, but it's not entirely obvious and intuitive how you take all of the value that's locked in BTC and bridge it to Ethereum and get these compound network effects. And so subnets allow anybody to do that. So if you were going to launch your own layer 1 network tomorrow, instead of doing it on your own and sort of being siloed and very bespoke, you can launch a subnet on Avalanche, and then you can launch your virtual machine there, and you get consensus out of the box, networking out of the box, you get the underlying data structure of your blockchain all out of the box. And so we have a subnet today, the primary subnet, and it has the 1,000 validators and all this stuff. And we have some really ambitious goals for the future. Many people have probably heard of Ethereum, which we're calling a spoon of Ethereum. So basically taking the entire Ethereum state and balances and just dropping them in a subnet with another instance of the EVM.
So Ethereum would be a subnet.
Yeah, exactly. It would be a virtual machine on its own subnet. Mm-hmm. So,
and with its own coin.
Yeah. So today, whenever you fire up, so subnets are live today. For what it's worth, you can launch subnets and you can launch virtual machines on the main net. And when you fire up a subnet, you get to decide what fees what asset the fees are paid in. So today on our primary subnet, we use AVAX. AVAX is a fixed cap asset. There will only ever be 720 million. So it has the same properties as Bitcoin in that regard, but we use it for fees and we actually burn it, which creates a deflationary pressure on the asset. But you're not forced to use AVAX on your subnet. So again, whenever you fire it up, you can tell it at that moment what exactly assets you want to use. And there are a couple, so as you mentioned, permissionless and permissioned. We want to offer that full spectrum of functionality for people. If they want a totally permissionless network, you can do it on Avalanche. Or if you're doing permissioned and regulatory compliant networks. Today, all of the subnets are permissioned. So whenever you fire one up, you actually have to whitelist all of the validators, and then the validators have to whitelist your subnet. That won't be the case soon. We're introducing permissionless subnets, and then we have some very cool virtual machines that are on freeze today because the permissionless subnets aren't in place. We have a Bitcoin Cash script virtual machine and a Bitcoin script virtual machine, and we talked about doing initial subnet offerings. So creating a Bitcoin subnet, launching a Bitcoin virtual machine on there, and then taking the whole UTXO set and dropping it on there. I think this also presents a lot of opportunities. The one I've been using is Doge. Now, to be clear, I think Elon is an absolute wizard. I know he's surrounded by a ton of really smart people. And so I know he's informed in a very, very deep way. So I'm not of the opinion that he's like an idiot stumbling into the blockchain space. I don't believe that at all. I think this dude is an absolute wizard, and he's entering the blockchain space because he knows what's up. Like we all know what's up. Like it's that cool. And he chose Doge for whatever reason. I don't think Doge is the best, of course. And I think plenty of other people see its flaws as well. But for whatever reason, he saw the vision there. And you know what's interesting is years ago, like 2015, 16, I don't remember exactly when, but one of my friends who doesn't live and breathe this stuff every day told me then, I remember very clearly, he was like, man, I think Doge is going to be huge. And I was like, Doge, really, man? It's a meme, like, really? And he was like, I just think that the mainstream people will identify with the Doge brand, right? And I didn't see it at the time, right? Because I'm super tech centric, and I was like, Doge, no way. But man, my friend called that a mile away. And so I suspect that's part of why. I don't know anything about what Elon's thinking. I have not had any meetings with him or his team. But just from what I project, I suspect that might be a part of it. He's incredibly savvy. He's like a meme lord, right? If you follow him on social media, he's very, very, very savvy. And I suspect he probably understood that a lot of this blockchain technology is hard for people to approach. Either they think Bitcoin is worth $1 trillion a coin and they could never own one, or the communities are very condescending and they treat you like you're an idiot whenever you ask very, very basic questions, or they drown you in technical jargon that you just don't have time to understand because this isn't your world. And Doge is just real friendly, right? It's a real, real, real easy tribe to on-ramp into. Now, I don't suspect it's the end game. Just like every other UTXO system, eventually you're going to want tokens and smart contracts and all this stuff. They will as well. But anyway, to steer back onto subnets, what I think is the smart play with Doge, because the stuff they're talking about, boy, it would be nice if we could have faster throughput. Boy, it would be nice if we could have faster finality. What they should do is create a Doge virtual machine and launch it on a subnet, and then copy over the UTXO set and do an initial subnet offering. And all Doge subnet. Yeah, they would get all of the stuff they're trying to develop. They would get it out of the box. And so, but yeah, the exciting things about subnets are we offer this whole regulatory compliant play. And so just to be clear, because some people aren't into regulatory compliance stuff, I myself come from the permissionless web and the permissionless Bitcoin and Ethereum ecosystem. But I have an understanding and appreciation of the problem that Avalanche is trying to solve, and that's the Internet of Finance. And again, not all finance in the world is permissionless. So it's critical for us, if we're going to solve this problem, that we offer this functionality for permissioned networks. And if that's not your bag, don't use it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like any other tech. If you don't like it, don't use it. Yeah. But this regulatory compliance thing is going to be huge. So being able to say, like, I need all validators of my subnet to be in this legal jurisdiction. They all have to be in China. They all have to be within the United States. All of the validators on my subnet need to meet certain hardware requirements, because I'm positive that the dApps which run on my subnet are going to be super memory intensive, and I don't want the performance to stutter because the validators aren't strong enough. I need everybody who has an address on my subnet to have a corresponding professional license of some type. right? So there's all kinds of these levers and strings you can pull for regulatory compliance, which are going to be huge, because the truth is regulation is coming to crypto. Everybody knows this. It's been on everybody's lips over the past few weeks, and we've seen it over the past few years. If you go back to 2017, during the ICO craze, there wasn't much regulation. Fast forward to when Avalanche launched our token, and there was a ton of red tape, especially for us that are based in the United States. Yeah. And it's going to be more and more like that around the world. And it will help blockchain technology, and it may slow it down as well, right? It's going to be probably pros and cons. But the point being that regulation is for sure coming, and the Avalanche network and the Avalanche protocol is specifically building the best-in-class tooling for these regulatory compliant blockchain and decentralized platforms. And so I think that's going to play to our advantage over the next several years as regulation just becomes more of a thing we all have to talk and deal with.
Yeah, this is really good. I guess when you have, if you're a libertarian and you want a permissionless, you have but Avalanche is very customizable. It's very, very flexible. It's really amazing.
Yes.
Well, Gabriel, thank you very much for your time. It's very nice talking to you here. You have so many experience. Well, I wish you all the best and keep doing the great work with Avalanche and spreading the blockchain technology in the world.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, and thank you for doing what you do. Advocacy is the most critical thing. On-ramping people is absolutely critical. And so thank you, and thanks for having me.
Yep. See you.
Cheers.
Cheers.